I'm sure you've heard of that Newsweek article where it was kind of a horror story, but from 10 to 12 people gave their horror stories about what life as an intern and what life as a resident was. And since you just completed your residency, which is interesting because when we first did discuss coming on the air, you were a student, so to speak. So congratulations on writing your boards. I know that is incredibly tough to get that paper out and then write the boards. So congratulations on that. But can you give our listening audience just a little bit of your perspective of what internship life was like and what residency life was like?
Yeah, and I read the Newsweek article. Obviously, newsworthy news gets sort of published. So there are things that I agree within that article are fairly typical, and then there's some of it is very program specific. So I think if we think about what the goal of an internship is that you're taking these young doctors, you've been there, you graduate day one, and that very next day you can do anything within the realm of veterinary medicine. And everybody expects you to know all of those things. So it's nice to have that year that's going to bridge that gap. But during that year, you're going to be asked to rotate through all of the rotations that you did as a student, but now you're in the driving seat. And there's just no way that you're going to be good at all of those things because, 2 days ago you were a student and not truly responsible. And then now today you're totally responsible. So there's that aspect where it's a huge learning curve, whether you're doing it in an internship or you're doing it just in private practice, where it's just you and maybe a senior person who's around to help guide you and mentor you a little bit. So it's always hard. It's going to be a horrible year in terms of you're going to feel like you don't know anything. I'm, 4 years out and I still feel like some days I don't know as much as I should. I think that's something we bring on ourselves as vets quite frequently. So I think it's going to be stressful, and I think it's going to be a year that you're going to be forced to grow whether you want to or not. When I look back on my internship year, there's just so much that I learned. And I think some of it is generally my attitude. So going into it, I knew I wanted a residency. I knew I wanted a residency in neurology, and I knew I was at an internship that would probably get me to that point. And so when you've got crappy days and, you've been on shift for 18 hours, you go home, you barely shower, get into bed, sort of still wet, wake up 2 hours after that, and you're back on shift again. There are those days, and there's nothing fun about those days. But then I also think back at my intern class, and we had a lot of fun. You're all in this mix together. Everything equally sucks. Everything equally is great. You made a lot of good friends. You really learned a lot. So I think that article probably plays upon some of the more negative aspects that are out there and doesn't necessarily think about some of the really good things. And I think sometimes it's very cliche to say this. You're only going to know about the good things when you're through it and out, and you look back and you're like, actually, I had a really good time. I've been to those people's weddings. They talked about my kid when he was born. We now have these really great relationships. But at the time, did I really want to be there, for 24 hours, sort of almost straight? Not really, but so that's my sort of take on that. I think sometimes there is something to be said that it's a growing field. So if you reflect back 10 years, there were hardly any internships, and it was a sort of a thing that was not as routine to be doing. So a select few went and did internships, and most people wanted to do private practice and just get out and start earning and start learning and do the thing that you were trained to do. And now internships, it's almost like we're not quite sure what to do with them. Are they to get you a residency? Is that what an internship is for? Is an internship to get you up to speed a little bit more than just being in school? Is an internship meant to provide you with mentorship? And we don't know how an internship is going to function. Whereas if you think about our friends in human medicine, it's very prescriptive. You're going to graduate medical school. You're going to do a residency that's some determined length of time, and everybody's doing those things. So it's not sort of unusual or optional. You need to do those. You can do optional fellowships and move forward afterwards. So I think part of the problem is that there's not a huge amount of oversight for these internships because we don't really know what we want from them. And I think that the Newsweek article probably has pushed the conversation forward a little bit, but we were beginning to say, well, who's watching these internships and who's saying what's a good one and what's a bad one? And vets very infrequently like to get all on the same page about anything.
Right.
And so how do we try and regulate them without being too sort of pushy about what makes a good one and a bad one, and recognizing there's going to be academic ones, there's going to be private practice ones, and that everybody has a different need and a want from their internship.
No, that's a great introspective, retrospective viewpoint. I'll tell you, I've interviewed at least 5 people and talked about this. That's a great way of putting it, and it's what your expectations are and what you get out of it. I think is something that the students can definitely learn from.